Still with Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. Let's talk about the BBC, Isabel. We'll talk about Laura Kuenssberg in a little while. You blondes, you're always making mistakes, aren't you? Dizzy blondes. I'm not being sexist, everyone. I'll explain in a little while. But let's talk about... Yeah, we'll come to that. We'll come to that. Let's talk about Lineker. Apparently, I mean, you know his background. I know you're not a massive football fan, but you must have been interested in his political interventions, his tweets embarrassing the corporation. His relationship with the bosses there has become more and more strained. And Mail Online says it has seen an email being circulated at the BBC to suggest that bosses are drawing up a statement to be released very soon announcing his departure. When the Mail confronted him at his home, outside his home, he told them two words. The second one was off. Usually in journalism we take that as a confirmation. But I mean, it will be interesting if he goes, won't it?
I mean, that is an absolute non-denial and characteristically not very classy of Mr. Lineker. I would be astonished if the Mail Online, which is a very reputable news website, were to publish something like that without very good grounds for doing so. If they say they've seen an email, they will absolutely have checked the authenticity of it, just as we would on any of our sister papers. And so I would take that as pretty serious, and that it does sound from that headline as if he is on his way out. I suppose, in a way, the remarkable thing is that he's survived as long as he has.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
Endless controversies, and really being pretty brazen about his refusal to rein it in, despite his position as I think still the highest paid BBC...
£1.3 million. And the last thing we heard, Isabel, was just a couple of weeks ago. Well, actually, a couple of months ago, we heard that his people have been sniffing around ITV, seeing if they might be interested in him switching channels. And then the last thing we heard, which was about 2 weeks ago, I think, was that in a bid to extend his contract with the state broadcaster, with the BBC, he had offered to reduce his £1,350,000 annual income by £350,000 to take it back down to a mere £1 million, which would still make him the highest paid broadcaster at the BBC, in fact the highest paid person there, but it does look as if this tetchy relationship between him and the bosses at the BBC might be coming to an end. There's not much more we can say about this, but Lineker may soon be shown the red card by the BBC. Let's stick with the BBC now and talk about former political editor, still a very revered presenter at the BBC, Laura Kuenssberg. Tonight, she was due to host a very compelling interview with Boris Johnson. Of course, his book Unleashed is all over the Daily Mail. I'm not sure if you can buy it yet. I'm sure you can. And he was going to do a sit-down with Laura Kuenssberg. Now, being an assiduous journalist, she'd made all her briefing notes. All this preparation, it's alien to me. Anyway, she'd made all these notes.
For a guess.
She made all these notes, briefing notes, and was sending them to the production team and her team, if you like, and accidentally, apparently, sent them to Boris. So in other words, this would exactly. I mean, there, but for the she's a good operator. There, but for the grace of God and all that. Here's what I would have done, though. I wouldn't. So the bosses then at the BBC said, "Well, this is untenable. We can't do the interview now." Well, I'd have done the interview, because do they really think? Does Laura Kuenssberg and the BBC really think that they're so clever that an experienced, supremely successful journalist like Boris Johnson would have no idea what kind of questions they were going to ask him? He'd have known anyway. Why didn't they just do it?
Well, Kev, actually, this is very unusual, but I think you are totally wrong about this. And this
It
isn't
is
just,
known, you know. I am known to be wrong sometimes.
this is not just all blondes sticking together, me, Kuenssberg and Boris. And I will say, look, I like Laura. I really respect Laura Kuenssberg. I think she's a really fair, decent, and obviously very, very professional.
Good operator, yeah. Good operator, yeah.
I don't think that they could possibly have gone ahead with the interview, knowing that they'd already circulated these briefing notes accidentally to the former Prime Minister. Can you imagine? Let's just put it in a frame it rather differently. If it had got out that she'd done the interview and it got out that they had accidentally sent him the notes before, oh my goodness, come on, all hell would have broken loose. And I'm afraid, I think, Kev, you would have been one of the first to be all huffing and puffing and saying, this is outrageous.
I probably would have been. You're probably right.
Briefing former Prime Minister. I mean, here's the irony of this whole thing. Boris probably wouldn't even have read the briefing notes. I mean, he's notoriously lazy with that stuff, and he will have thought, oh, this is nothing I can't handle anyway. So truthfully, he probably didn't even notice. But I think she absolutely had to do what she did. Bad day at the office, all credit to her for just holding her hands up and saying, look, I did this. And come on, I mean, maybe some of our listeners can message us with the similar, obviously not quite involving ex-prime ministers, but cringe-worthy, heart-stopping moments when you've accidentally sent an email or a text message or a WhatsApp about someone to that person. I know I've done it. My heart practically stopped. My blood boiled. I still remember the moment. Thing is, there's no taking it back. And those emails that you get saying, so-and-so would like to withdraw their email, that just makes it worse, right?
Yeah, so that's when you press send and then you go, oh my God, and then start sort of trying to claw it back as if you can retrieve the situation, but the mistake has been made. That's a great idea. Anyone, have you ever done that? Have you ever sent messages to the wrong person excruciatingly? And maybe, what's the worst howler you ever made at work? I could perhaps tell you a few of mine, but it's only a 3-hour show, so I don't think we get through all of them. But no, seriously. But I mean, to be fair to Laura, as I say, there but for the grace of God, and every journalist will have read that story and felt for her, to be fair. But I don't know. You're probably right. It would undermine the interview.
I'm not probably right, Kev. I'm actually right.
All right, you're actually right. Well, what about if he's got all the briefing notes? Make sure that none of the questions you ask him are in the briefing notes. So he sits down. He thinks he knows everything. First question. So, Boris, how many kids have you got? How about that?
I think that question might be directed at other politicians, but maybe with Boris, people have tried that one already, haven't they?
They have.
So, look, I don't think that would have worked. I get where you're coming from. The last thing they'll have wanted to do is drop that segment. You know, they will have agonised over whether there's any way they could still do it. But they just couldn't, Kev, because people like you and,
you're right. I accept it. Well, Mike Graham would have gone ape.
This is unusual.
Yeah, no, Mike would have gone ape tomorrow morning. I mean, there you go. These things happen. I hope maybe he goes on to ITV or Channel 4 because he's an entertaining guy, and that would have been a great interview. But the best laid plans and all that, Isabel. Listen, great to talk to you as always. We'll talk again next week. That's the brilliant Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott.